Avatar va commencer. Et je vous demande donc d'accueillir chaleureusement et d'applaudir comme il se doit Sigourney Weaver, qui arrive, Zoë Saldana, Stephen Lang, Jon Landau, and Mr. James Cameron. And of course, Sam Worthington.
Sam, you're down here. Sam, right here. Next to Zoe.
That works. You're always looking different.
Exactly.
Do you want to guide her just there?
Break right.
On this way.
One more. Break left. One more.
Merci messieurs les photographes. Merci de prendre place. And thank you all for being in Paris with us today. It's an honor. Well, let's open up with a question to Jon Landau, the film producer. It's been 10 years since Titanic. What were the new challenges you faced on Avatar to carry out both a technological feast and stay true to James' artistic vision?
Well, they were one and the same, which was really about characters and being able to capture the performances of the actors with what we call an image-based process rather than what people had done in the past, so that we could service these great actors that you see up here with us.
Question? Yes, please, sir.
Bonjour, une question pour James Cameron. Je crois qu'il est consultant à la NASA et je voulais savoir si ça pouvait expliquer le traitement scientifique très très réaliste de tout l'univers de l'Avatar.
Well, Mr. James Cameron, this is the question for you. This gentleman, I understand you're also a NASA consultant, and does it explain the very scientific approach and the realism that you brought to Avatar?
Well, I'm basically just a big science geek at heart, and you know, I love the engineering and I love the science, but the important thing, and I think John alluded to it, is that regardless of all the technology that went into making the film, ultimately the film speaks to the audience on an emotional basis, and you know, to a certain extent a thoughtful basis, but mostly on an emotional basis. And so regardless of all the technology we used to make the movie, it was really important to make sure that what, you know, our actors were doing up on the screen didn't get lost in all that. You know, and I think that's the biggest challenge of making this type of picture. It's a big, complicated picture, a lot of visual effects, a lot of technical production, and you know, fortunately, as the writer, I feel strongly about the characters. You know, I love it when the casting comes together and I get, you know, great people around me to make the film with, and to me, that's the sacred part of the film production process.
Sam Worthington, you were chosen to be Jake Sully, the hero of Avatar. Could you tell us what the training, the preparation was like, both physically but also probably emotionally?
Well, I spent some time with Jim's brother, who's a former Marine, because I thought it was essential to kind of spend some time with, you know, those men and just give me a grounding. And then out of that, I kind of went, well, how do I find a way in? You know, because they're, you know, each man was individual to their own cause. And I looked at my, you know, I looked at the movie, and the movie's about opening your eyes up to another world. And Jake reminded me a lot of my nephew, who's 9 years old, who opens his eyes up to this world all the time. And Jake has a cheekiness. My nephew has a cheekiness. Jake is fearless, same as my nephew or any 9-year-old, and they have a courage. And you know, to me, that was gave me a good grounding, and also that, you know, if children or the children in all of us go and see this movie, then they have a hero to hang their hat on. That's how I approach Jake.
Thank you very much. A question there? No,
Hello.
here.
D'abord, je voulais vous féliciter tous pour ce film magnifique, quand même. C'est une question pour James Cameron et Sigourney Weaver à propos de la science-fiction. James Cameron, pourquoi aimez-vous tant la science-fiction? Est-ce que c'est lié à des films que vous avez vus dans votre enfance qui vous ont donné le goût du genre? Et Sigourney Weaver, vous êtes une icône, vous, de la science-fiction, notamment depuis la saga Alien. Est-ce que vous en êtes fier ou est-ce que c'est une étiquette qui, parfois, est un peu embarrassante?
Well, first of all, congratulations to you all for this incredible film. This is a question for both Sigourney Weaver and James Cameron. Were you both science fiction geeks, so to speak, and what were maybe the films that triggered your interest in it as a child, or whatever triggered your interest in it as a child? And more specifically, Sigourney, you are really an icon of the genre, of course, with the Alien films. Do you feel that what remains is more pride, or do you sometimes feel a bit caged in by this etiquette, so to speak?
Comment dit-on geek en français?
Un fanat cinglé. On dit un geek maintenant.
Well, I was definitely a science fiction geek when I was a kid. I used to, I lived in one town and I went to school in another town. I rode a bus each way about an hour and a half every day, each direction. So while I rode the bus, I read books, and they were always science fiction or fantasy books. And I read a book a day, a book every other day, and just a voracious diet of it. And as I read these stories of other planets, other worlds, other times, alien cultures, I'd draw pictures because I was an artist, and I always had to interpret what I was reading with images. So Avatar, decades later, was a way for me to take all these ideas that I'd been working on in my imagination for a long time and put them all into one movie.
What about you, Sigourney?
What about you, Sigourney? Do you feel trapped?
Happily so. Actually, I read a lot of adventure and fantasy growing up. I used to read about a book a day too. I love Jules Verne. I didn't like a lot of science fiction per se because it seemed rather cerebral. And actually something Jim said at Comic-Con has really resonated for me. He said that science fiction was the exploration of what it means to be human. And that was something that was very interesting to me. What makes me an earthling and all of that. So I grew up doing that, and then I didn't expect to go into science fiction. To me, it's a wonderful thing to bring to the audience, to take them out of this world and bring them to another world. So I never felt, cornered by it. I felt actually liberated by it in many ways. The roles that, for instance, Jim wrote for me in Aliens, and the role that he wrote for Neytiri and Michelle Rodriguez, these roles, sometimes you can appreciate a more powerful woman if she's in another world. And so I think that we go to where these great roles are. And I've been able, fortunately, to do a lot of other kinds of movies at the same time, and I really think the success of Aliens made that possible.
Thank you very much. Question over there.
Ma première question sera pour James Cameron. Depuis Abyss, voire Terminator, tous ces films ont en filigrane une histoire de couple. Donc j'aimerais savoir ce qui est le plus compliqué pour lui, d'écrire une bonne histoire de couple ou de domestiquer la technologie. Et la seconde question est pour tout le monde. Le film fait beaucoup d'allusions un peu légères à la politique américaine, ou en tout cas un mode de politique américaine donc. Et qu'est-ce qu'il pense d'une lecture qui ferait des navis des Afghans et qui donc du coup ferait que le film serait pro-afghan?
All right. This is a question first to you, James. I mean, obviously, in many of your films, including Abyss, Terminator, and this one, the couple, the love story, is at the core of the film. What do you find the toughest, to explore a couple relationship or to domesticate and tame technology?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's two completely separate lobes of the human brain. I think like I'm fascinated by the technology, but I'm probably more fascinated by human relationships. And as Sigourney said, what it means to be human, and science fiction is a way to explore that. But I find that the more fantastic the subject, the more fantastic the setting, the more recognizable and universal the relationships and the people need to be. You know, I've done different types of stories. There was a husband and wife in the process of a divorce in the abyss. There's a man who was in love with a woman he'd never met in the Terminator. You know, in Boy Meets Girl in Titanic. This film is a man and woman meeting for the first time, but it's a very different story than Titanic, because they each have so much to teach each other, and it plays out over a longer period of time. And you know, I think that Jake's character feels that he has to earn his place in the eyes of Neytiri. So it's a relationship about teaching, and I find that learning from someone else is a very important part of love and a lasting relationship. So that was just something I was exploring in this movie with their relationship. Also, this interesting idea that they become kind of equals at the end as warriors, that they love each other, but in order to go into the final battle that's going to decide the fate of their world, they have to, in a way, let each other go. They have to not be burdened by what is going to happen to the other one in a battle that's going to be a life and death battle, and how they both deal with that, which I think is part of what's heart-wrenching about the last scenes of the film.
Zoe, I was just saying that maybe, Zoe, you can touch on a little bit your character and how you prepared for it, because that was very different, and it was all about the relationship, really.
Yeah, and before going to that, to touch a little bit on what Jim was saying too, it was. Do you remember when we were shooting those scenes that we were supposed to be like, you know, in our banshees and we're going to go in different directions? It was hard for me to sort of like, as Neytiri, to part from Jake, and we had various discussions of that, like, how do we do it without leaving this worry in the other that will prevent us from focusing and becoming these soldiers and executing this mission, which was to save this planet. And it's just a testament on how much Sam and I got involved into this world, and we became these characters so much so that sometimes we personally unwillingly made decisions because they were deciding for us. And that's kind of like a bizarre thing.
It was nice that the Hangi thing that we came up with, though. We were trying to incorporate a little bit of Maori culture, because we had shot so much of the film in New Zealand, and so the final sort of thing that they do, where they breathe each other in before the battle, is actually a Maori greeting and a farewell, which is called the Hangi, which was that was just our little homage to New Zealand culture, indigenous culture.
Thank you very much for this precision. I mean, the second part of the question, which addresses all of you, and I'll start with you because I think it touches your part, so to speak. I mean, there could be another reading of the movie that has to do with American politics. And if we read the Na'vi as being maybe the Afghans, your movie could be read as a pro-Afghan movie. Do you agree with that position? I know it's a tough one, Stefan, but somebody's got to do it.
No, I wouldn't. It never occurred to me to view the movie in those terms. I would say that the politics of the film, the stance that the film takes on issues, ecological, anything that could be interpreted as political, at least to me, the politics are quite overt. And as such, it states its position quite clearly. It's pro-Na'vi, it's pro-planet. So you almost don't need to discuss it, in a sense, but to construe that as being pro-Na'vi, as being in some way pro-Afghan, I think.
Taliban.
Yeah, I think would be an absurd kind of stance to take on it myself. Yeah.
Would you care to comment on that, any of you?
I think the idea of pro-Taliban is pretty crazy. I mean, the Taliban are a pretty loathsome outfit, you know. And I don't care how open your eyes are, how perceptive you want to be. You know, I mean, one of the big challenges for me, I've always believed in trying to understand other cultures, try to see through their eyes. It's one of the big themes of the movie. But when I get to the Taliban, I can't get there. You know, I just can't get there. I'm sorry. So I'm not going to make a pro-Taliban movie. Boom. End of sentence. All right. Now, however, I do think there are many instances throughout history where so-called civilized people have gotten up out of their homes and gone to other countries for reasons that they were perfectly capable of justifying to themselves, but ultimately the end result was, we want your shit. We want what you've got. And it started with, by the way, the Spanish, the English, and the French coming to North America and South America and conquering all the indigenous peoples and enslaving them or destroying them and destroying their cultures. So I think no one in this room does not have ancestors who are without sin. Okay? We need to own that. And not like we can do anything about it. It's not like you can run out and help bring back from extinction some culture that's been destroyed. But we can think about it going forward. Think about maybe preserving a little bit of the indigenous cultures that still exist on our planet, and more importantly, their habitat, whether it's rainforest or wherever it is, and think a lot about maybe not destroying the remaining biodiversity on the planet.
Thank you very much. Question here? Where's the mic?
Oui, c'est une question pour James Cameron. Depuis ses origines, le cinéma a permis de traduire des univers imaginaires. Quand vous regardez les grands créateurs des grands univers imaginaires, de Méliès à Fellini à Kubrick, est-ce que vous avez le sentiment, avec les technologies que vous utilisez, que vous faites toujours du cinéma, ou est-ce que vous inventez un art différent, un art du 21e siècle, qui n'a peut-être pas encore de nom? J'aimerais avoir votre sentiment là-dessus.
All right. Well,
you guys talk too fast. For my limited French.
Forever films have been, of course, exploring imaginary worlds, and some, important like Méliès, Fellini, Kubrick, have done so marvelously. Thanks to technology, do you feel that you are still, in a way, making films, or are you entering another art form of the 21st century that maybe doesn't have a name yet, but is not quite the filmmaking of the past?
No, I think it's still cinema. I think it's absolutely cinema. But I think cinema redefines itself every few years with new techniques. I think when George Lucas came along with Star Wars, he reimagined cinema and what the boundaries of the imagination could be, and proved that science fiction and fantasy could be commercial cinema. And cinema took a turn at that point because the science fiction of the 60s had been more cautionary, more dystopian, and now all of a sudden it was adventure fiction for the mainstream and so on. Maybe Avatar's an attempt to reconverge the pre-Lucas cinema with the post-Lucas cinema so that we keep the adventure, we keep the excitement, we keep the thrills and spills, but we also have some ideas and some conscience in the storytelling and some themes in the storytelling that are more like the science fiction of the 50s and 60s and the literary science fiction of the years before that. I think the technology is not really the issue. There are always going to be advances. Sound was an advance, color was an advance, widescreen was an advance, now 3D. Digital sound was an advance. Now we have 3D. These don't change the fabric of cinema or the rules of storytelling.
Another question here.
Oui, je voudrais poser, vous avez dit que vous étiez fan de science-fiction, mais je trouvais dans votre construction, avec les bons cow-boys et les méchants indiens, le fort installé au milieu du territoire indien, est-ce que vous étiez fan aussi, est-ce que vous êtes fan aussi de western?
Well, you were mentioning earlier that you were a science fiction geek, but there's very much in your film structure, like almost a fortress within like a Western structure. Yeah. Were you also a Western geek or fan?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, yeah, sure. The Hell's Gate base is a fort, and there's the Indians out there on the plains. Except it's not plains; it's a rainforest. That's a simplification. We also had a lot of influences from, let's say, the indigenous clans and tribes in Brazil that are getting displaced by the deforestation that's taking place there and so on, and the same thing in Burma, Indonesia, places like that. It's going on all over the world right now. So you don't have to look at, everybody tries to find cinema as a lens for cinema, as opposed to, for me, it's the direct experience of the world around us, the natural world around us, and the geopolitical world around us. My references usually aren't other films. You know, I like Westerns as much as any kid, you know, but I wouldn't say I always wanted to make a Western.
Another question here.
Une question pour James Cameron sur les effets spéciaux. Ils sont révolutionnaires. Les visages sont parfaitement modélisés. Du coup, ça pose peut-être un peu une question éthique sur l'avenir de cette technologie et sur l'utilisation de visages d'acteurs peut-être décédés ou pour les films. Comment vous voyez l'avenir de cette technologie de modélisation des visages?
Well, the special effects in your films are truly revolutionary, and there's one point that is extremely strong, is that the way the faces are totally well represented thanks to that technology. Do you feel that could raise a sort of ethical question about the fact that you could put any actor's face and work on it, and even, the gentleman was saying, even dead actors' faces and play with it? Do you feel there's an ethical point here in the use of technology?
I think it is an ethical point. I think, you know, the thing is, on Avatar, the Na'vi and Avatar characters were played by you know, Sam, Zoe, and Sigourney and the others. They created those characters. They created those performances, and it was our job subsequently to make sure that those performances were not in any way lost or degraded by the technical process, so that the 100% of what they did was you know, was transmitted to their CG characters, and they knew that that's what we were doing. That was our goal going in. To bring back, you know, Marilyn Monroe or Clark Gable or something like that would be pretty crazy, because it wouldn't be driven by that original performer. However, you know, when Zoe's 75 years old, she can still play Neytiri if she wants to.
Well, actually, so I have a question for you, because earlier on Sigourney Weaver was saying how much James Cameron is empowering his female characters, how much they're strong women. I mean, how did you feel, Zoe, how did you feel he was empowering you, helping you through your performance throughout the whole movie?
See, I don't even think it's something that Jim does on purpose. It's not something that he's ever handled as if like he's doing women a favor, because then it would be unfair to everybody, to Jim and to us as women. I just think that Jim has been very fortunate to be a very present observer of strong women around him in his life, starting from his mother, his wife, even his daughters or friends or anything, and he allows himself to see. And I think that in order for a man to really do that, a man needs to be really in tune with his feminine side. And just as much as women have a masculinity to us, that we also need to tap into that in order for us to better understand how men operate. Men should do the same. And for actresses like Sigourney and I, it's really a breath of fresh air when you get to work with a male filmmaker that gets it and captured us, not by enhancing us and making us something that we're not, but by really capturing us and believing that we can get somewhere. And that's exactly how he treated us, and it was pretty awesome, because I was able to sort of voice my opinion the same way Sam and Jim would, and they were also with every right and entitlement to disagree with me, because it wasn't about a man going against a woman, it was about artists trying to tell a good story.
Autre question, oui. Voilà.
Bonjour, une question pour Sigourney Weaver et une pour Stephen Lang. La question pour Sigourney Weaver, c'est depuis que vous avez travaillé pour James Cameron dans Alien, est-ce que vous trouvez qu'il a changé ou est-ce que c'est toujours le même cinéaste? Et la question pour Stephen Lang, est-ce que, parce que vous avez déjà joué des généraux de la guerre de sécession, est-ce que c'est pour ça que James Cameron vous a engagé pour jouer le colonel Quaritch?
Well, this is a question for both Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang. Well, Sigourney first, I mean, since you've worked with James on the first Alien, do you feel that he has changed as a director? What would you say has changed with him, if anything at all?
Well, you know, when we worked on Aliens, Jim was absolutely, I think, a visionary, a perfectionist, who brought his best game to every day and inspired all of us to do the same. The bar was very high. And he actually had a crew at the time who was still going, oh, we love Ridley Scott. Who's this Jim Cameron person? And every time he tried to show Terminator, they wouldn't show up. So he actually had an uphill battle, and I thought he handled it with a great deal of patience. But by the end, they were all like, yeah, Ridley who, you know? But I think now I notice he's still such a fighter, still such a perfectionist, still will stay there till the bitter end, get every little bit of juice out of a scene. But the difference, I think, is that he has such a good time, and especially in the case of Avatar, he visualized this world, created the creatures, created the species, created the language, the costumes, the flora and the fauna. So, gosh, it was just like, you know, I think he was having such a wonderful time in every scene. At the same time, I have to say, because he touched on this earlier, he made you feel that even though we're in the biggest production ever, the only important thing was what was happening between me and all of us together, that there was no film, no story without what was really happening. So he took extra time. He'd ask us, what do we want to try? Do we want to try something else? We really got to explore, and we never felt that ticking clock, even though I'm sure John did. I'm sure Jim did on some level, but he never wanted that to interfere with us. So.
Well, the question for you, Stephen Lang, is, I mean, do you feel that it's because of your previous and very strong military parts that you already did on screen that James chose you to play this tough Colonel Miles Quaritch?
Well, I think that probably the experience I've had playing some military leaders did contribute to his confidence in my ability to do it, but I think that really it came about through a series of conversations that Jim and I had about the character. As troubled and as difficult as Quaritch is, it's very, very clear to me that Jim has a profound respect and admiration for the military way of life. And Quaritch, in so many ways, is a real combination of admirable qualities. There's tremendous integrity, the way he goes about his job. He has a paternal sense of protecting. He takes each breach of security in a very, very personal way. And so these are the background, the story issues that Jim and I talked about when we first discussed the possibility of my doing the part. And I think that we found ourselves in sympathy with each other, and that's what it was.
I'd like to just comment on that because, you know, from my perspective, one of the things that really attracted me to, you know, casting you for this was the articulate lucidity with which you were able to talk about the character and the other characters you've done. And it comes from the fact that you know, I think in addition to being a really gifted actor, you're also a very talented writer. And so you understand how the words work in a moment, but how they relate to the other scenes. And I don't know if you know, but Stephen's also a playwright, and he actually offered some dialogue choices to me on the film that got incorporated. And you know, it was really a good working relationship. From the first day that we talked about the character, I knew it was going to work out really nicely, which it did.
Well, thank you. Question here.
Je sais qu'on a déjà parlé du point de vue écologique du film à travers le respect de la planète. Je voudrais savoir ce que James attend de la conférence de Copenhague qui se joue bientôt.
Well, obviously we already, I mean, talked about ecology and to take care of the planet. Is there anything that you truly expect from the Copenhagen conference that will happen shortly?
Well, you know, I mean, I have kind of jaundiced view of the political process. I believe very strongly and optimistically in human capability when it's on an individual level. But you know, I don't have a great deal of confidence in our governments at this point. I would like to keep some optimism that the Copenhagen summit can produce some positive results, because we need some positive results here pretty quick.
Question here.
Le film est vraiment impressionnant sur la manière dont il plonge le spectateur dans l'expérience et dans la découverte d'un nouvel univers. Je voulais savoir en fait justement sur cette immersion, quelle avait été l'influence des jeux vidéo, et notamment des progrès fulgurants qu'ont fait les jeux vidéo en termes de ciné-génie et de storytelling, et également aussi comment il a travaillé, parce que j'ai cru comprendre que donc Avatar, le jeu, était avait été construit en même temps que le film, donc je voulais savoir quel était le lien entre le jeu et le film.
Well, your film offers a very impressive immersion into a new world. And this gentleman wanted to know what were the influences of video games and what is the bond that you established between your film and Avatar the game, which was done at the same time. So,
well, it's an interesting question. We formed a good partnership with Ubisoft, who developed the Avatar game in parallel with the production of the movie. I would say video games were not a particularly strong influence for me visually. So I have my own style, and it's pretty much how I've always worked in the way I approach scenes visually. I wasn't attempting to emulate a style, let's say an anime style or a video game style, if there is such a thing. But the Ubisoft relationship was very good, because we started with them 2 years in advance of the game release, and they came to me with an idea that showed that they really understood the film thematically. And they came up with this idea that you can play as either a human character or as a Na'vi character. You can even make that decision as you go along throughout the gameplay. And I thought that was very novel, very unique, and very appropriate to the themes of the film. So we started a partnership that I think was a very strong partnership. They borrowed from us, we borrowed from them. It was a great working relationship. And I haven't played the finished version of the game, but I'm told it's very good. Plus, it's in 3D, so can't be bad.
Une question pour James Cameron. En France, on a déjà des héros tout bleus, mais ce sont des nains et ça s'appelle les Schtroumpfs. Je voulais savoir ce qui vous avez poussé à les choisir bleus, vos Na'vis.
Well, in France we have also our blue heroes. We want you to know they're called the Schtroumpfs. What basically triggered the wish to make these Avatar, these blue creatures? Why the color blue?
Oh, I love blue. It's a good color. I've spent about 2,500 hours underwater, and everything's blue there. So well, if you think about it, all the warm tones have been taken, all the pinks and tans and golden browns and so on have been taken by humans, so we had to do something else. So it was either green or blue. Can't do green, little green men, that's been taken, so basically I didn't have much choice. No, blue is a beautiful color. I love the way the characters turned out, but the bizarre thing is that working on this movie with these blue characters for 4 years, blue doesn't seem a strange color to me for skin anymore. It seems a perfectly natural color for people.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Sam? I mean, you are.
I look better as the Na'vi than I do in real life. That thing's muscular, it's ripped, it's got a great waistline, and Jim's endowed me with a lovely tush. So I don't mind seeing myself as blue.
It's actually pretty funny. There was a lot of discussion amongst the male designers of the movie about Neytiri's derriere, but there was no discussion at all about Jake's. And then some women that worked on the film in the visual effects were pointing out that he actually had a pretty good butt too. So I realized that we needed to have a balanced approach here.
I like the balanced approach. It works. Another question here. There's the mic here.
Oui, bonjour. Vous avez travaillé avec notamment le volume qui a été créé pour filmer les performances capture. Je voulais savoir en quoi, pour Sam Worthington ainsi que les autres comédiens, en quoi ça avait changé la façon de travailler, puisqu'il n'y avait plus de caméra classique sur le plateau. Et du coup, également avec ce volume et cette performance capture, à quel moment James Cameron avait fait son découpage technique et à quel moment il avait choisi ses plans?
Alors, this is a question really for all the cast, the actors. I mean, you worked very much on the space called the volume for the performance capture. Would like from each of you, did it change anything in the way you acted? Because there's not such a thing as a classical camera anymore. So let's start with Sigourney.
Well, I thought it was wonderful. You're in a little black suit with a tail and ears, and I thought everyone looked very good. And well, not you, you were in it. But I always think of Sam with a tail and ears. Frankly, that's the way I just think of him. But you know, you're in the volume, and you know that a lot of work is going on around you. But I think you, the actor, just have the responsibility of being in the moment and being in the world, and you're with your other actors. And Jim was always very careful to show us in his camera and on the screen a rough version of the forest we were traveling through, or whatever the scene was. You had a very real feeling of it as you were moving through it, and he would always put something on a stand for you to react to if it was a special plant or something like that. So he made it very easy, but the rest of it is really, you're on an empty stage. It can be anything you want. So I found it, at least for the actor, incredibly freeing and organic and moment to moment. And really, Jim was looking for one great master. And then with this unbelievable camera, he could come in on a day when no one else was there and do the coverage. I mean, the science fiction of the technology was more science fiction than the story.
Did you feel also that it was a freeing experience for you? I mean, Zoe, did you also find it very freeing, Zoe?
It was. I think we were doing press in Japan. I was trying to tap into what it was that and the word Sam put it in just a nutshell. It was just like, it was liberating. It was absolutely liberating, because once you remove all that's around you, you're just left with a childlike form of getting somewhere, and you can only do that by allowing your imagination to run freely. So, and it was just, that's how it felt every day.
I see Sam nodding, and you too. You both also had this experience.
That's exactly right. I found that the volume doesn't restrict the way you act. It enhances it if acting is truth in imaginary circumstances. And the volume helps you strive for absolute truth in absolute imaginary circumstances.
Yeah. Although you have very little part
I
of the
did
volume.
far less of the performance capture than my colleagues here, but when I first entered the volume, and I envied them, I would have loved to have done more of it, but they've stated it about as well as it can be. It brings you back to the fundamentals of the acting craft, which, as Zoe points out, is just your own powers of pretend.
And James, the other part of the question was, did this process, this performance capture, change anything in the way you were editing the movie?
No, it's interesting. Well, everything got edited twice, because the first we didn't have shots, because we were working just on performance. If I could take you through the process a little bit, it begins just with doing the scenes without doing any of the photography. So we've uncoupled the acting process from the photographic process, which is what I liked about it, because the actors had 100% of my focus, and they had 100% of mine. So the idea that you can literally just spend the entire day just working on, as Sam said, the truth of the moment, whatever that is, whether it was trying to capture something kind of very, very warm and almost, we do a lot of improvisational stuff just to get a laugh or a smile or a moment, something like that. You think about all, in the back of my mind is all the artifice that's going to come downstream to make all this stuff look real by the end of the day. But the important thing was we start with with a moment of human truth, even though you're playing, alien characters. It's still science fiction is still made by human beings for human beings. So it's about that moment of emotional truth. And then everything else we did after that was about preserving that. The editing process was interesting because now we had to take the performances and we had to say, there's the same choices you normally have. Maybe Zoe was better in take 4, and Sam was better in take 6 of the same scene. So we had to make some performance choices. Then we had to shoot all the cameras, all the angles, all the coverage, the close-up, the two-shot, the wide shot, and all that sort of thing. Once we had that done, then the editing was normal, absolutely normal. The only difference was that I had the editor right there with me next to the volume. And as we do all the camera coverage later, the actors weren't involved in the camera coverage. It was done later, just me in the middle of a big empty room, maybe 3 or 4 times the size of this room, just walking around and doing the shots. But the editor was right there, so the editor had a direct communication with me as the director in that moment. So it was a more tight coupling of the editorial process and the shooting process than you would normally get. Normally when you're on a photographic set, you just shoot, and you worry about it later. You worry about all the editing later. Here the editing and the shooting were combined into kind of one interrelated process. So it was a little bit different and more precise for that.
Just to be clear, that the shots literally streamed right to the Avid editing system on the stage. So as Jim was doing one shot, the editors would be having it work with it. Jim would go over and sit with them and really be able to see how things were coming together.
Thank you. Well, last question.
On parle du film de l'année, plus attendu de l'année, on parle de technologie, on parle de film du futur. Je voudrais juste savoir, une question toute simple, qu'est-ce que vous avez ressenti la première fois que vous avez vu Avatar fini, James Cameron?
Well, we talked about lots of things, technology, the film of the year, expectations. But as you were talking about feelings and emotions, what did you truly feel when you first saw your avatar finally on screen?
Well, it was actually quite a joy. Normally I don't like watching my own films after I've lived with them for a long time. It was interesting because I had my cast sitting with me for the screening, and their joy in watching the film made me feel joyous, and they were whooping and hollering, and Sigourney regressed to being a 10-year-old yelling. And
I'm from New York.
she would have been right at home in a 42nd Street theater. And no, it was good. It was the first time I watched the film where I couldn't change anything because it was done. It was already being shipped out all around the world. And there was a great sense of relief, and a sense of relief that it worked, and that you could watch a 2-hour and 40-minute film in 3D and not even be aware of it, which I had always hoped would be the case, but didn't know for sure until about 6 days ago or 5 days ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. I wish I could say goodbye in Navi, but I wasn't taught, so if there's such a word, what would it be?
Coming.
Voilà, you heard it straight from Navi's mouth.